Jamie from Inky&Scrappy, sharing with you today a flip book inspired card. I actually had out my Den die set from Fawn and, of course, those cute little bears that I colored a while ago. Don't worry, I still didn't actually get around to using them. And I pulled out some thinner paper from close to my heart. It's some old stuff, so it's, I'd say, like a heavy text stock. Not stock, it's like a heavy text paper. It's pretty fine. And then I'm just bringing in my distress oxides here to kind of figure out the colors that are going to go best with it. I was kind of looking for a blue-green, gray type of tone. So I kind of have an idea. This is a total process video because I had no clue where I was going with this. How, yeah, it was, this is how I roll. So the idea was to do a flip style book or a flip style card. So where it would have 4 flaps on each. So I needed 2 upper flaps and 2 side flaps. My side flaps ended up measuring 6.5 by 4.25, scored at that 5.5 mark. And then my top and bottom flaps are 5.5 by 5.25, scored at 4.25. Now, you will see as I put this together, I probably should have figured out my measurements a little bit better or done a little bit different. I don't know, a little bit different measurements on my topmost panels because obviously it's going to have to get folded over everything else. And when you have that many layers, it's going to add a little bit more bulk and I should have made it a little bit bigger. For right now, I'm just figuring out how I want each layer to close and or go on top of the other. I'm trying to line my dies up as best I can in the middle without actually, like, measuring anything because, ew, I don't measure more than I have to. Now, I will say this. I did cut my inside piece down. So, like, I think I cut 1/4 of an inch off the top and the bottom. I shouldn't have done that. But I'll fix it. It's, it's a work in progress. I also wanted each one of my flaps to have an interior wallpaper per se. So that was kind of why I went with a very thin pattern paper instead of using the stuff that's more of like a 65-pound cardstock. This is definitely more on the text, like copier paper, like a heavy text paper. So I will cut all of that down, cut off, any excess that was overhanging. I did trim down a little bit, trying to figure, that it's, you're going to have your overhang and it's going to get bulkier. So I was trying to make sure that nothing was going to run into anything else when the flaps folded in and or down. And so I have my layers there. I was just making sure that they lined up fairly good. And then I'm going to come in and ink the front. So I'm going to start with some iced spruce, which I think is my lighter tone, is the iced spruce. So iced spruce kind of has, I put it in my neutrals or my grays. It's definitely, I think it's supposed to be like a green. I think it's maybe supposed to be in the greens. I have it in my grays because to me it's a green gray, not a green. You do you, boo, I do me. So this one, along with the weathered wood, and the weathered wood I think is like a blue-gray tone. I like to put those in my grays because I find they're more gray to me than the other. And then I will come in with this one as it's darker. So I was trying to go darker on the inside because as you get further into the cave, it's going to get darker. And then I decided I needed them to kind of coordinate with my pattern paper a little bit better. So I did come back in, and they looks really rough on camera here. They're really a lot smoother in real life. I never understand why that happens, but I did come in and kind of add in, I want to say it was peacock feathers for my green and then some antique linen for my yellow tone there. And then I am bringing in some of the darker here and there, kind of giving it that molten look so it's not a smooth transition. I wanted it to look like a speckled rock. And not doing a whole lot ink blend wise. I just want to kind of put it on there, get it up, and then we're going to put some water on each layer to give it that oxidized look. And then I'm going to work on putting it all together. So the base is definitely, or the flippy flaps were probably the hardest part to figure out on this one. And yeah, I really didn't figure it out the greatest, which is fine. I'm fine with it. It ended up turning out okay in the end. So I did cut that centerpiece down, and here I will end up angling in on my side pieces and my top and bottom. So where your flaps overhang. Now it ends up, I should have kept that inside piece at an A2. So I should have kept it at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That was my first mistake. It happens. So I could have recut it and started over again. And I just thought, I'm just going to go with it because even if I cut a new one, it might not be perfect. And so I'll probably end up having to cover it up anyways. So I just decided to stick with it, cut my flaps off here. So angling them just so that I don't have to worry about the overhang or the flap getting in the other flaps, the other side's flap ways. And so I did kind of cut in and on the bottom one, I think, because I was afraid that it was going to be, well, it did end up being like way bigger than it needed to be. But I will do double-sided adhesive and some liquid adhesive because I like to make sure that it's going to stay together. So I will butt that piece up here and add that in, and then I will add in each layer as they would go. I am going to make sure that I use a bone folder to try to get that crease as good as possible there. And yeah, you can see how much of an overhang it is down on the bottom. Yeah, it is what it is. And so I'm going to make sure that that fold is over the top of the other fold. So it probably ended up pushing out a little bit more than I had anticipated. So that's probably part of the reason behind that one. And, if I do this again, I'll know better for next time. Maybe. I probably won't. I'll probably make the same mistakes. Let's be honest here. And the third side. So far so good, right? I mean, for the most part, it's coming together how I had imagined. And then for the bottom one here, and of course my glue is going to get stuck because that's how it always happens, right? Like winter in Minnesota. That's all I got for you. It like super fast dries up my glue. So I'm going to set this one over and I'm going to do the fold. So yeah, you see, and I had to make sure that I lifted this one up fairly fast because I did have some adhesive that was like flowing over the other and I did not want to cause it just glue all together. Yes, you see how much I have hanging out there. Everything I cut off, right? Yeah. So I am just going to take another bigger piece of paper. I kind of measured it, went and cut it. I will put that down with some double-sided adhesive. Because it's such a thin pattern paper, I can't use liquid adhesive on it because it will bubble and ripple. and I didn't want that, so I just used the double-sided adhesive on this one, lined it up as best I could, and put it in the middle. So I have my background or my wallpaper in the back of the cave. And then for my back panel here to cover up all of my little flaps and over ink blending, you know, all that fun stuff, I'm going to come in with another piece of cardstock and cut that down to size. So I eyeball measure. I can't say that I measure because I'm really bad about measuring with the ruler. I kind of eyeball it. I was a little off on my measurement there, so I had to go and cut it off a little bit more. And that will give me a place to write or put a message on the back for my recipient. Hint, it might be my husband. This card is not leaving home. I can't get rid of it. It's pretty, and it took me a long time. So there is the inside. I did zoom this out so you could actually see the full card when it is open. So across it is about 15 3/4 inches. No, it's got to be longer than that. 15. So it's going to be 16, right? So 5.5 plus 5.5 plus 5.5 is 16 and a half, right? I don't remember. 5.5 plus 5.5 is 11. 11 plus 5 is 16 and a half. Okay, 16 and a half inches wide, and 4 1/4 plus 4 1/4 is 8.5 plus another 4 1/4 is 12 3/4 of an inch tall. You could maybe do this on a 12 by 12 sheet of paper. It wouldn't be as big, you know, do 12 and fold it in at 4 and 4 and then make it a little bit narrower. And you could probably get, that would work too. It would probably be easier. That was my original intention, and then I decided to go full bound ginormous. So I did bring in Lawn Fawn's Stitched Cloud backdrop, and I'm using that as my cloudy, well, not my cloudy, my, shall we say, grassy, not grassy. I used it as my, like, leaf or bushes that might be hiding the little cave. Well, it's probably a fairly good sized cave. But so I figured the tree, you know, the leaves that would be above the cave is kind of what's going on with the stitched cloud backdrop is kind of where I went with that one. And then for the bottom here, I'm going to bring in the grassy hillside borders. And I did pop it back off before it was dry because I realized you're going to see it in the background and I didn't want it to be stark white. And then I will end up just snipping off the overhang and making sure to clean up my messes so I don't have ink transfer all over the rest of my pretty cardstock. So I am going to make sure that is squished down extra good there. So that top piece is going to end up having to bow over all of the rest of that cardstock. Yeah. At this point, I was still kind of thinking I was going to do bears through the whole thing. I had a change of heart. So I am going to bring in that thin cards pattern paper again and just ink up the bottom here and make it green so it looks kind of like grass. And we're going to miss the rest of this because my camera died. I did decide to stamp out all of my images, and I decided to go a little on the extra side. So I decided each layer needed a different stamp set and or critters in it, as you would have in the forest. So, you know, where they would all live in the cave sort of thing. Of course, the bears are going to be way in the back, but that's beside the point. So I did end up using, I'll grab these all here. I ended up using the You're Just My Type, the Crazy Antics, the Den Sweet Den set, the Fantastic Friends and the add-on, the Totally Awesome set, the So Much Fun. I might have used one of those little bears, and the Extra Amazing Easter set, all from Lawn Fawn. I did cut them out with my brother Scan and Cut. I do have my color map will be on my blog if you are interested. There is an actual separate page where the color map can be found, so if you want a quick reference, it will be there. So I kind of took all of my images, kind of figured out what I was kind of thinking for each of them, and then I decided I needed a little bit more color or dark as we go towards the back of the cave. I just thought it was too, I don't know, it was too light by each one of those cave openings, and so I needed to darken that up just a teeny tiny little bit. So I'm going to start with the front one here, and I'm going to start with frogs or the toads from Totally Awesome. So I'm just adding them, kind of decorating or, figuring out what the outside is going to look like, because technically the frogs are going to live on the outside of the cave. Maybe it's next to a pond. I don't know. And then, of course, we have our little bunnies. And so the bunnies, I decided, were busy, crocheting or knitting, doing little hippity hoppity bunny things. But I figured the bunnies were going to live closest to the opening of the cave, so that's why they ended up there. And I'm just kind of laying out and figuring out my bats. So I didn't actually go in order here because I think the bats are further back in the cave than the mice are. Yes, I think they're the smallest opening. So I knew what I wanted to do with the bats. So the bats are bookworms. Batworms? No, bat books. Book bats? Whatever. The bats are busy reading and, hanging around reading a book and drinking coffee. Because that's what those of us who like to read a lot do. Drink a lot of coffee. Or other things in mugs that might not be coffee. And, all the fun things. So I was just making sure that all of my layers were working here. So I am bringing in the little mouse. And then, of course, he's going to have a light in his because, he needs to be typing. And I did bring in some black gel pen or glaze pen for all of the eyes. And I will do those as I go throughout the rest of this one. And yes, I messed up on the one. We leave it sit so we can go back and erase it. So for that inside one, I knew that I wanted the Den Sweet Den thing to be kind of sitting in my opening. That's why I kind of closed the flap before I put it in. And then I'm just trying to figure out how to layer all of my bears in there. And then I'm going to cut around the mama bear's hands here so she can be holding that book. And then she gets a light too because obviously she needs another light to read. And then the papa bear and the one little baby bear are going to be sleeping next to the picnic basket that they stole. So maybe that's Yogi. Although I think I painted my bears. Did I paint them brown this time or black? I don't remember. I think I did them a brown gray. Maybe I don't remember. Maybe it's Yogi and his family. Did you steal a picnic basket? Just kidding. So then I needed sentiments to go on each of my layers. And then I will cut them out using my Avery L simple, I think they're simple sentiment dies. And then I have everything all together, folded up. And so I need to add my sentiments on them as I go here. So you're totally awesome on the front to go with the toads. And here's where I'm trying to give it a little bit more wiggle room. I probably should have had an extra 1/4 inch on this one so I could have scored it and had an actual 1/4 inch like bottom piece that goes over everything. Oh well. To some bunny special on my bunny layer. I love you're crazy. So, you know, I think they just put antics on there. Just, I love you're crazy. And then I love hanging out with you. And on the inside, your tops in my book. So it will all fold back together here. And I do end up putting some, they're like cleared adhesive Velcro dots. So I put the whiter, like fuzzy side on the back first, and then I did the clear on top of them. So then when I close it, you have the clear that sits on the sheet that you're going to see, but you can't, it's hard to see them there because they're clear. I did end up going and doing one more on the next layer down to keep it down a little bit better. So, and here is my finished flip book. So it's kind of a story, but you know, kind of a love letter all at the same time. I love how it turned out. It, you know, better luck next time on my measurements. It's all good. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for joining me. And technically, you got like 5 card front ideas there. You know, you don't have to make it into a flip book style thing. You could do 1 card front for each card. It's all good. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and check out the stills on InkyandScrappy.com and keep getting inky.